passenger car hangs over the city, its windows full of frightened faces, while a man in a torn glove climbs toward it. Thank you for joining us. This story begins above the shining towers of Asteron, where a routine escort becomes something no one expected. Like, subscribe, and join us as it begins. Everett Sloan was hanging beneath a moving rail car when the first warning reached him. The warning was not a sound. It was the smooth, almost polite refusal of the maintenance latch under his glove. He was clipped to a safety line above 100 stories of Asteron traffic, with the city turning below him in layers of glass, light, and silver transit lanes. The rail car passed over Crown Line, the elevated transit line that crossed the diplomatic district, carrying empty seats toward the next transfer point. Wind pushed at his jacket, and the narrow inspection platform rattled under his boots. Everett leaned closer to the access panel. The latch had been opened recently, and a fine line of fresh metal showed around the seam. That alone meant nothing. Asteron had crews everywhere, each with permission slips, timing logs, and enough excuses to drown a man in paperwork. But the panel had been resealed with the wrong grade of adhesive. He ran a thumb over it, then checked the sensor tag with a pocket reader. The tag said the panel had not been touched in 9 days. The adhesive said it had been touched within the last hour. Beautiful, Everett muttered. The city can build a rail line that floats across the sky, but it cannot teach its maintenance crews how to lie consistently. His earpiece clicked. Mr. Sloan, the calm voice in it belonged to the scheduling system assigned to his client. The delegation convoy is entering Crown Line in 4 minutes. Everett looked up toward the distant checkpoint. The rail car was already carrying him away from the panel. He caught the edge of the maintenance platform, hauled himself back onto it, and started moving fast. Tell them to hold the convoy. Hold it for what reason? Because I said so. That is not a recognized reason. Everett grinned without humor. Then write down structural concern. Write down unexplained access. Write down I have a bad feeling and I am professionally qualified to have one. The system paused just long enough to make him dislike it. The route change was approved by transit security. By whom? Authorization source is sealed. Of course it is. He reached the access ladder as the rail car curved into a wall of mirror towers. His line tightened. Far below, traffic lanes and pedestrian bridges crossed a crowded public terrace. The delegation convoy was still several blocks away, gliding between escort vehicles toward the elevated Crown Line transfer. Everett unclipped, crossed the narrow service grating at a run, and reached the inspection hatch just as the first public alert sounded. A soft chime followed at once by another. Every screen on the nearby buildings shifted to a red transit warning. The convoy changed lanes. Everett stopped. He had not requested a lane change. The scheduling system had not told him about one. Yet the vehicles carrying Ilara Venn and her staff moved smoothly toward Crown Line as if the route had always been planned. Everett was still sprinting when the first drone rose from the lower traffic layer, followed by 2 more from between cargo shuttles. Everett saw their direction before anyone else did. They were not flying toward the convoy. They were flying toward the rail anchors. Ilara, get down, he shouted into the open emergency channel. For half a second, nothing happened. Then the drone struck. The sound was not an explosion, so much as a hard crack through the metal bones of Crown Line. The rail lurched, and a civilian transit car behind the convoy slammed sideways into its guide channel. The escort vehicles swerved. A second drone burst near a signal tower, and every screen in the district went white. Everett ran as the nearest security gate tried to seal in front of him. He hit its shoulder first before it closed, rolled through, and landed hard as the rail above screamed and its magnetic field stuttered. The civilian car had lost its outer guide. It hung at an angle, one end dragging sparks along the damaged line, the other end sliding toward open air. The convoy had stopped 50 yards ahead. Its armored side door opened. Everett saw Ilara step out before the protective team could stop her. She was taller than most humans, though not by much, with a compact, athletic frame under a dark formal coat. The narrow, pale markings along the side of her neck had gone bright with stress. Her eyes tracked the hanging transit car, then the crowd below. Everett reached her just as a security officer grabbed her arm. "You need to get inside," the officer said. "No, Ilara replied." The word was quiet. It cut through the noise better than a shout. Everett grabbed the officer's wrist and shoved his hand away from her. "If you have a plan for that car, I am listening. There are emergency crews coming." "In how long?" The officer looked at the rail, then at the damaged signal tower. Everett answered for him. "Too long." Ilara looked at Everett. "Can you reach it?" "Yes." "Can you keep it from falling?" "No." Her gaze flicked toward the civic terrace below. "Then we need to move everyone out before it does." He liked that answer. It was not hopeful. It was useful. "Stay behind me," he said. "I hired you to protect me. Then help me do my job." Her mouth tightened, almost a smile. That was not a request. Was it? Not even close. They ran toward the transit car. Crown Line had a service channel along its inside edge, barely wide enough for one person. Everett climbed onto it, gripping a rail with one hand while the damaged car groaned above the open city. Passengers were pressed against the windows, some standing and others on the floor. A frightened passenger cried somewhere inside, but too many people were in danger for Everett to let one sound pull his attention apart. The car slid another foot. Ilara followed him onto the service channel. "Back," Everett snapped. "The manual override is inside the forward housing. I can find it. You cannot access it without a civic clearance. I will introduce myself." Despite everything, she gave him a sharp look. "That is not how clearance works." "Then today may be educational for both of us." They reached the forward coupling, where the strike had torn the panel half open. Everett wedged his fingers under the bent edge and pulled. Metal cut through his glove, but he ignored it. Inside, the emergency brake controls were dead. Ilara crouched beside him, one hand pressed to the panel. Her eyes moved over the exposed wiring. "The support field is still receiving power," she said. "It is being redirected. Can you stop it?" "Not from here, but I can delay the automatic shutdown." "Do it." She pulled a thin access strip from the inside of her sleeve and connected it to the panel. Her face tightened. "What?" Everett asked. "The system recognizes me." "Good. It recognizes that I am under security review." "That sounds less good." "It is asking for confirmation that I am acting under emergency authority." "Can you confirm?" "Yes." "It will record everything." Everett looked toward the convoy. Cameras had already gathered, including news drones, private feeds, and security lenses. They were not ordinary civic cameras. "Then it records everything," he said. Ilara met his eyes. She understood immediately. If she used her authority here, the system would show her acting at the center of the incident. If someone wanted to frame her, this would feed them more material. The car slid again. "Confirm it," Everett said. She did. A blue line flashed across the exposed panel. Somewhere under the rail, massive locks began to shift. The transit car stopped sliding for one breath, then lurched as the damaged guide rail tore farther away. Everett moved to the side hatch. "It is jammed," he said. "There is an interior release. Can the passengers reach it?" "Not while the car is tilted." He looked at the cut panel, then at the emergency equipment compartment mounted on the service channel. "Of course," he muttered. "The emergency tools are locked behind a code." Ilara glanced over. "Do you know the code?" "No, but I know what a cheap hinge sounds like when it is scared." He drove the heel of his boot into the compartment seam twice. On the third strike, the latch broke, revealing a cable launcher, 2 magnetic braces, and a cutting tool with a warning label large enough to make Everett suspicious. "Do not use near energized surfaces," he read aloud. Very comforting. He fired the first magnetic brace into the rail wall. Behind them, the second went into the upper frame of the transit car. The cable snapped tight, jerking his shoulder forward. "Ilara, I need you on the override." "I am on it. Keep the support field from shutting down." "I'm trying." "You always this calm when the city is dropping on people?" "No," she said, and for the first time he heard strain under her control. "I'm terrified. I simply have work to do." Everett looked at her for half a second. Then he cut into the side hatch. The cutting tool spat bright sparks as the transit car rocked and people shouted inside. Everett worked faster, forcing the blade through the seam. The hatch released with a hard bang and swung outward. He climbed through. The floor was angled steeply. Passengers clung to seat frames and handrails. Several were injured, but nobody was trapped beyond reach. Everett moved quickly, securing a tether to the nearest seat anchor and passing the line to the first passenger. "One at a time," he said. "Hands on the cable. Do not jump. Do not look down unless you want your day to get worse." A few people stared at him. Then a woman near the hatch let out a startled laugh. It was small, but it broke the panic enough for others to move. Outside, Ilara kept the emergency field alive in short pulses. Every pulse made the lights in the car flicker. Everett passed people through the hatch to the service channel, and Ilara took them one by one toward the convoy side, where security officers finally began helping. She never stopped moving or asked Everett whether it was safe. She only asked who needed help next. The final passenger was a man pinned by a twisted seat frame near the rear. Everett reached him just as the transit car gave another deep, violent shudder. "Not ideal," he said. The man looked at the floor, sliding away from him. "Is it going to fall?" Everett grabbed the bent frame and tested it. "Eventually. Let's be gone first." He cut the frame loose. The man crawled toward the hatch. Everett followed, but before he reached it, the support field failed. The transit car dropped 3 feet. The cable brace snapped taut. Everett slammed into the wall. Through the broken hatch, he saw Ilara, thrown against the access panel. Her hand stayed connected to the override strip. "Everett," she called. "I am here. The lower catch is opening. I can guide the car to it, but the manual brake will lock when I release the field. Will it hold? I do not know. Then let us find out." He dragged himself to the hatch and climbed back onto the service channel. The car was moving again, slower now, heading toward a lower maintenance platform that had opened beneath it. Ilara had one hand on the controls and one hand gripping the rail. Her coat sleeve was torn. A line of dark blood marked her palm. "You can let go," Everett said. "If I let go now, it drops wrong. Then I will take the panel. You do not know the sequence. I know enough to hold a button. That is not how this works. It is how it is working today." She almost laughed, then caught herself as the transit car slid toward the open platform. Everett braced beside her, covered her hand with his, and held the override as she guided the final alignment. The car struck the lower catch. Metal screamed. The braces snapped free. For a breath, the whole structure seemed to hang in nothing. Then the emergency locks slammed shut around the transit car. The city roared. People on the terrace below cheered. News drones swarmed upward. Security officers rushed toward them at last, too late to matter. Everett looked at Ilara. She was breathing hard, her bright neck markings slowly dimming. "You all right?" he asked. She glanced at his bleeding glove. "You asked that after you tried to fight a transit system with your boots?" "It was a good boot." Her eyes narrowed. "You are impossible. Still alive, though." Then the public screens changed. The rescue footage vanished. A new image replaced it. A black drone fragment. A transit access log. A seal associated with the Riven delegation. The voice on every screen was calm and official. "Security alert. Evidence recovered from the Crown Line attack indicates possible involvement by representatives connected to the Riven autonomy delegation." The crowd noise changed. Everett felt it in his chest before he saw it in their faces. Confusion. Fear. A hard turn away from. Gratitude. A security officer stepped forward, weapon lowered but ready. "Ilara Venn," he said. "Under stability protocol, the emergency rule that can freeze an autonomy vote, you are required to enter protective custody." Ilara looked at the officer, then at the screens. Her expression went still. Everett saw the truth before anyone said it. The transit car had been the bait. The rescue had been the picture they wanted. And every second Ilara had spent saving people had been recorded as proof against her. The officer reached for her. Everett moved first. Everett caught Ilara by the elbow and pulled her toward the damaged service gate. The officer's hand closed on empty air. "Mr. Sloan," the officer called. "Do not make this worse." Everett looked back once. That sentence has never made anything better. He shoved the emergency gate open and guided Ilara into a narrow maintenance stairwell, just as two more officers came around the transit platform. The stairs dropped through Crown Line's support column toward the freight levels below, giving them one way to leave the public scene before the security net closed. Ilara kept pace without complaint, though Everett could feel the tremor in her arm where he held her. "You are resisting lawful custody," she said. "I am resisting a very convenient timing problem. They have evidence. They have a picture. Those are not the same thing." They reached a locked bulkhead. Everett pulled his pocket reader from his belt, held it to the panel, and watched the screen turn red. "Your access is revoked," Ilara said. "Thank you. I enjoy being briefed on disasters." He took a narrow tool from his kit and removed the panel cover. Ilara looked over his shoulder. "You cannot bypass a civic lock. I cannot bypass it legally. You say that as if it matters. Today? Not much." The panel sparked once. The bulkhead opened a hand's width. Everett forced it wider, then pushed Ilara through ahead of him. Her wrist display chimed. They both froze. Her wrist display flashed a notice that protective custody had activated and location tracking was now required. Everett did not hesitate. He took the display, found a fastener, and ripped it free. Ilara stared at him as he dropped it into the open wiring panel. "That was an official delegation device," she said. "It was an official delegation beacon. It contains my files. Then we hope the city enjoys your notes." He shorted the panel. A brief burst of blue light swallowed the display. For a moment, neither of them moved. The act was small. One ruined device and one broken lock. Yet Everett saw the weight of it settle across Ilara's face. She had spent years working inside Asteron systems. She knew which form to file, which committee to pressure, and which quiet conversation could move a vote by 1 degree. Now she had burned her own link to all of that. Everett softened his voice. "You can still turn yourself in." "No." He waited. She took a breath. "If I do, they will isolate me before I can speak to anyone who is not already part of this. They will tell Riven I am safe. They will say the procedure is temporary. They will ask everyone to be patient." Her eyes met his. "My people have been patient for 3 generations. Then we move." They descended 2 more levels, leaving Crown Line's polished public transit spine for the freight levels below. Everett was taking Ilara toward Lower Ring, where the older service routes might let them move before the search teams learned which way they had gone. Everett looked around at Lower Ring's dripping ceilings, crowded freight lanes, and workers moving cargo by hand. "Lower Ring is a real city," he said. "It does not need polished towers to count. You prefer this?" "I prefer places where doors have hinges instead of opinions." That earned him the smallest breath of a laugh. They crossed a narrow catwalk over a service shaft. On the far wall, a public screen showed Ilara's face beside the alert notice. The words beneath it had changed from possible involvement to security concern pending review. Everett slowed. "Watch the wording," he said. "What about it?" "They're not accusing you directly. Not yet. They're teaching everyone what to fear." Ilara looked at the screen. "They're making the next step feel reasonable." "Exactly." Her expression hardened. "Then they know the stability protocol will hold." Everett nodded. "Tell me what that means." She did not answer at once. They moved again, ducking behind a freight hauler as 2 black Horizon Response skimmers drifted through the next intersection. Horizon Response was Asteron's contracted security arm, the force used to enforce stability protocol once the city decided a crisis required control. Everett watched the way they turned. "They're searching lanes, not faces," he whispered. "They think you are still using official transit." "I am not." "You were supposed to." The skimmers passed. Everett led Ilara through a cargo hatch and into a storage corridor full of sealed containers, where their voices would not carry into the freight lanes. Only then did she speak. "The autonomy charter lets Riven begin running its own water stations, weather network, food routes, and repairs," Ilara said. "It is the first step toward operating essential systems without Asteron's permission and continuity authority. It is the Asteron office that wants to keep that control. It calls the arrangement stewardship, but Riven still has to ask for parts and water transfers. And stability protocol? An emergency rule," Ilara said. It can freeze the charter after 3 linked public crises make Riven look unable to govern itself. Crown Line is the first. Yes, supply exchange is the second, and civic core is the final step. Core needs all 3 to make permanent control look lawful. Everett studied her. Then we find proof before he gets the other 2. Ilara stopped beside a sealed cargo container. There is one person, Ressa Morn. Who is that? A transit technician. She filed questions about Crown Line maintenance 2 weeks ago. My office received a copy because the route passed through the delegation zone. Ilara rubbed at the torn sleeve around her hand. I was supposed to meet her tomorrow. Why were you not told? Because I did not think a damaged sensor was the beginning of a coup. Everett glanced at the blood on her palm. You have a first aid kit? Yes. Use it while we walk. I can do it later. Later is a word that loses fights. She gave him a look, but she pulled a small medical strip from the inner pocket of her coat. The strip sealed the cut across her palm with a soft hiss. Everett checked a faded service map painted on the corridor wall. Where is Ressa? Near Lower Ring, an old maintenance station called the Old Junction. It is below the public transit lines, close enough to Crown Line that Ressa could have seen the altered records before someone erased them. Of course it is called that. It was built before the city had names for everything. Then it may be my favorite place in Asteron. They moved through the cargo tunnels for almost half an hour, following the service map toward Lower Ring and the Old Junction. Everett varied their pace, doubled back twice, then deliberately left an obvious trail toward the drainage channel, the route a train tracker would expect frightened fugitives to take. At the third intersection, Ilara stopped him. You are wrong, she said. Everett looked at her. That is a bold claim. Explain. The left tunnel. It leads to a drainage channel, and it is the route your trail tells them we took. The people chasing us will follow it. That is the point, Everett said. It sends them the wrong way. No, the tunnel to the right has no public listing. It was closed after a pressure failure years ago. Delegates are not told about it, because it runs under the old civic archives. She pointed at a nearly invisible seam in the wall. There's a manual release behind that panel. Everett studied the wall. There was no sign of a door. You are certain? No. Her eyes held his. But I am more certain than you. He considered that, then handed her the tool. Ilara found the panel latch almost immediately. Behind it was a wheel lock, stiff with age. Everett helped her turn it. The hidden door opened inward, releasing a gust of cold, stale air. Your city really does have too many doors, he said. It is not my city. Tonight, it is trying very hard to be. The passage behind the door was dark. Everett stepped through first, then felt Ilara's hand catch his sleeve. Everett, he looked back. For not leaving me at Crown Line. He did not make a joke. Not this time. You are not going to leave those people. He said. Neither was I. She let go of his sleeve, but her expression changed. The distance between employer and hired protection had shifted by a degree neither of them named. The hidden passage led them beneath Lower Ring, the older freight level where Crown Line's public routes fed into cargo and service lines. Asteron's polished upper city vanished above them. Here, workers moved cargo by hand because the automated lifts were older than the current regulations, while Horizon Response skimmers passed overhead and people looked away. Everett kept his head down. Ilara pulled the torn edge of her coat high around her neck markings. At the Old Junction, the maintenance station where Ressa had agreed to meet Ilara, a rusted transit shell sat half buried in the wall. Its windows were opaque with years of grime, and a narrow door stood open. Everett raised a hand, signaling Ilara to stay back. A voice came from inside. You are late. Everett stepped in with one hand near the compact shock tool at his belt. Ressa Morn sat behind a strip control console, surrounded by rail components, paper maintenance sheets, and a metal case with 3 locks. She was human, older than Everett by perhaps a decade, with grease on her forearms and an expression that suggested she had not slept since before Crown Line failed. Her eyes moved from Everett to Ilara. So the alert was right, Ressa said. You are running. The alert is wrong, Ilara replied. That is what everyone says when their face is on every screen. Everett shut the door behind them. You filed a report about Crown Line. Ressa's gaze landed on him. And you are? The person asking whether the report still exists. It exists. Good. Not in the system. Better. Ressa leaned back. I found service commands on Crown Line that did not match any active crew. I reported them. 6 hours later, my supervisor told me the logs were corrupted and I should stop digging through records that did not concern me. Then 2 people in Horizon response jackets, the same contracted force now enforcing the lockdown, came to my station and asked for my tools. You gave them your tools? Everett asked. I gave him a broken battery pack and told them it was a scanner. He nodded with respect. Good answer. Ressa tapped the metal case. I kept the original printout and a piece of the sensor relay someone replaced. Ilara stepped closer. Can we see it? Ressa studied her for a long moment. Why should I trust you? Ilara did not lift her chin or invoke her office. She simply said, you should not. Not because of who I am. Trust the evidence if it holds. If it does not, you can walk away. Ressa's expression softened by a fraction. She unlocked the case. Inside was a folded stack of paper, a small relay unit, and a thumb-sized memory wafer sealed in clear film. Everett examined the relay first. Its serial code had been filed down, but a strip of pale blue resin remained near one edge. Same adhesive as the panel I found, he said. Ressa looked up sharply. You saw the panel? About 4 minutes before the city tried to drop a train. He spread the printout on the console. The maintenance commands were a maze of numbers and route markers. Everett ignored most of it. Ilara did not. She moved one finger along a sequence, then stopped. This is not a rail priority code, she said. Ressa frowned. It came from Transit Authority. It was routed through Transit Authority, but the command structure belongs to Civic Continuity, Ilara said. That is the internal system Continuity Authority uses to feed a crisis into Stability Protocol. Everett looked between them. Plain language. This was not only meant to damage Crown Line, Ilara said. Crown Line was the first public emergency in a Stability Protocol sequence. The attack had to look like proof that Riven could not keep order, not like an attack on the rail. Ressa's eyes hardened. How many? 3, Ilara said. The old transit shell seemed to grow smaller around them. Ressa picked up the memory wafer. This has a predictive service model. I cannot open all of it. The access was partitioned. Ilara took it carefully. I can. You still have credentials? No, she said. But I remember the structure. Everett watched her work. She connected the wafer to a dead-looking console, bypassed the network link, and entered a sequence from memory. Lines of data filled the screen. Asteron's lower map showed 3 locations. Crown Line, already marked complete. The Supply Exchange, the second target. And Civic Core, the final target. The timer beside the Supply Exchange showed less than 2 hours. Everett understood at once. They had to reach the Supply Exchange before it ran out. We are going shopping, he said. Ressa stood. I am coming. You will be a target. I already am. The Supply Exchange is crowded at this hour, Ilara said. If they create panic there, it will make Crown Line look less like an isolated attack and more like a pattern. And then Civic Core lets them use that pattern to lock the charter, Everett said. We stopped the second incident before they can use it. He slid the relay and printout into his bag. Outside, the sound of skimmers deepened in the corridor. Ressa killed the console lights. Everett drew his shock tool. New rule, he whispered. Nobody opens a door unless they are ready to ruin someone's evening. Ilara's eyes found his in the dark. For a man who dislikes procedure, she said softly, you have a lot of rules. Only the useful ones. The first Horizon response skimmer passed the old junction without stopping. The second did not. Its lights moved across the frosted windows of the transit shell, and a shadow paused outside the door. Everett lifted 2 fingers. Ressa stopped breathing. Ilara stood very still beside the dark console, her hand resting near the memory wafer. A voice sounded through the door. Transit maintenance inspection. Open the door. Ressa stared at Everett. He shook his head. The voice came again, still polite. Ressa mourned. You are required to cooperate with public safety personnel. Everett leaned close to the rusted wall and looked through a crack near the frame. The person outside wore clean boots with no maintenance wear. A compact restraint launcher rested low against one leg. Maintenance crews do not bring restraint launchers to inspect a broken train, he whispered. Ressa's jaw tightened. The door latch started to turn. Everett pointed toward the rear service hatch. Ressa led them through a curtain of hanging cable and into a cramped crawl space behind the old transit shell. The passage was barely high enough to crouch in. Ilara went first, Ressa behind her, Everett backing through last. The front door burst inward. Everett heard the sharp impact of a launcher hitting the console where Ilara had been standing. "Move," he said. They moved. The crawl space opened above a service duct that ran toward the freight levels. Everett dropped into it, caught Ilara by the waist as she lowered herself after him, then helped Ressa down. The duct was wide enough for one person at a time. They ran bent over while Horizon Response personnel entered the old junction behind them. A searchlight cut through the vent opening ahead. Everett stopped them at a split. "Left is obvious," he said. "Right is hot." Ressa looked down the right branch. Heat shimmered near its ceiling. "It runs behind a food processing line," she said. "The fans are active. Can we use it?" "For 3 minutes. Then we have 3 minutes." Ilara looked at the narrow duct. "And after that?" Everett flashed her a quick grin. "That is a future Everett problem. That is not comforting. It is not meant to be. Move." They crawled through the heat as the air grew thick and sweat ran down Everett's neck. Metal burned through the knees of his pants. Behind them, the sound of pursuit entered the duct. Ressa glanced back. They found the split. Everett pushed forward. "Then do not let them enjoy it." The duct dropped abruptly into a vertical shaft. A maintenance ladder ran down its side, ending at a locked grate 12 feet below. Everett descended first. The grate's electronic panel was dead. "Of course," he said. Ilara came down behind him. "Can you open it?" "Maybe. Maybe." Every tool has an honest answer. "Mine is maybe." The heat alarm began to chirp above them. Ressa pointed to the base of the grate. "Manuel bolt." Behind the lower plate. Everett pulled the plate loose and found the bolt. It had been welded in place. "Who welds an emergency exit?" "Asteron," Ilara said. "Right. I walked into that one." He drove the cutting edge of his shock tool into the seam. It was not built for metalwork, and it shrieked in protest. "The bolt suffered." Everett kicked the grate twice, and on the second kick it broke free. They dropped into a dim warehouse lane as hot air poured through the shaft behind them. The grate snapped shut just as a shadow reached the ladder above. Everett did not wait to see whether it would hold. With the second target still counting down, they crossed Lower Ring through loading alleys and old pedestrian ramps toward the supply exchange. The public alerts followed them from every wall screen, and the language had changed again. Ilara Venn was now described as an individual of interest in a possible autonomy-related security event. Everett read the line twice. "They're getting more careful," he said. "Why?" "Because the rescue footage is circulating. People saw you help. That should help. It will help us with some people. It makes the people running this more nervous." Ilara looked at him. "You sound certain." "I am. A lie works best before anyone sees the person you're lying about. After that, you have to work harder." They reached the outer service wall of the supply exchange, the public distribution hub marked on the map as the second plant emergency. The building was enormous, a stack of cargo bays and public halls built around an open central market. At this hour, thousands of residents were collecting food packets, water cartridges, repair materials, and household supplies. It was exactly the kind of place where panic could become a weapon. Everett crouched behind a cargo container and studied the entrances. "There," he said. A row of sealed freight carriers sat near the west bay. 6 of them. 2 clean, 2 evenly spaced. Ressa followed his gaze. Those were not there this morning. Ilara examined the civic map on a nearby public terminal without touching it. The air exchange lines run under that bay. If they trigger a pressure loss, the crowd will run into the main corridors. Everett nodded. They want the crowd to run into the main corridors. And when the corridors fill, Ilara said, the emergency doors close to contain the pressure loss, turning the exits into traps. Ressa's face tightened. "Can we call someone?" Everett looked at the security. Cameras sweeping the bay. Who do you want to call? The people chasing us. Ilara looked across the market. They're local workers. They know the flow. If we can get the warning to them without triggering the alarm too early, we can move people away from the West Bay. Everett glanced at the timer on the memory wafer. 42 minutes. You have a plan? Not yet. Good. I hate being left out. They entered the market separately. Everett took the outer lanes with the impatient pace of a delivery worker, while Ressa slipped toward a maintenance kiosk. Ilara moved into the public flow with her coat hood drawn high, but she did not hide completely. People noticed her. A few stared, and one person raised a handheld screen as if to record her. Everett tensed. Ilara gave the person a single look. Not angry, not pleading, direct. The screen lowered. At the central distribution board, Ilara found a worker badge hanging from a damaged terminal, but did not take it. Instead, she spoke quietly with a woman checking water containers. Everett could not hear the words, but he saw Ilara point toward the West Bay, then toward the children and elderly people in line. The woman's expression shifted from suspicion to concern. One person became three. Three became six. The warning moved without a public alarm. Everett reached the freight carriers. Their surfaces bore normal shipping marks. He checked the underside of the first one and found a thin cable running beneath the pallet frame. It was not an explosive line. It was a sensor loop tied into the pressure system. He followed it to the second carrier, then the third. They are using the delivery belt, he murmured. Ressa's voice clicked through the small hand radio she had given him. I found a control box. It is patched into the oxygen mix. Can you shut it off? Not without tripping the entire west sector. How long until the pressure drops? Once it starts? Less than a minute. Everett looked across the market. Ilara had begun directing people toward the eastern corridors in groups, using a supply delay as an excuse. Most were moving. Not enough. He saw a pair of Horizon response agents enter through the south gate. They were not looking for a device. They were looking for Ilara. Ressa, can you isolate the carriers? Maybe. Everybody loves that word today. Do you have a better one? Not yet. He pulled the cover from the nearest carrier's underside. The cable inside split into three paths. One carried the pressure trigger, one carried a false safety signal, and the third ran toward a small sealed unit he could not identify. Ressa came over the radio, her voice tight. Everett, someone has overridden the countdown. They're triggering the trap early. He looked at the timer. It had jumped from 39 minutes to 12 seconds. Ilara, he said. She was halfway across the hall, too far to reach by voice. Everett ran. The first carrier hissed. A low groan passed through the floor. Then the West Bay door slammed shut. People turned. Some screamed. Air vents along the ceiling began drawing hard, creating a sudden wind through the market. Loose wrappers and papers spiraled toward the closed bay. Everett reached Ilara and grabbed her hand. East corridor. Now. She did not argue. She climbed onto a distribution platform, lifted a voice amplifier from an emergency kit, and spoke into it. Everyone on this side, move toward the blue markers. Do not run. Keep moving. Help anyone who falls. The west doors are unsafe. Her voice carried clear across the market. For a second, the crowd hesitated. Then a loud metallic snap came from the West Bay. The floor shook. The hesitation broke. People surged. Everett moved along the edge of the flow, shoving open storage gates and clearing obstructions. He saw a disabled transport chair caught near a delivery barrier with two older people struggling to move it. He cut through the crowd and grabbed the chair. Hold on, he said. One of them looked toward the ceiling vents. What is happening? Bad planning. We are fixing it. He pushed the chair toward the eastern corridor as the air pressure dropped another degree. Ears popped. People began coughing. Ilara was ahead of him, using a service terminal to unlock a side route that should have been sealed. Her official clearance had been revoked, but she had found a public safety access node tied to evacuation authority. She worked fast, reading the prompts aloud to herself. Emergency crowd release. Local override. Confirm immediate hazard. The terminal denied access because her security review was active. Ilara stared at the screen. Everett reached her with the transport chair. Tell me that is not bad. It is bad. Can you make it less bad? She looked at the wiring panel beneath the terminal. Then at him. You break doors. I break rules. Teamwork. She pulled the panel open, removed a small module, and placed it against the terminal sensor. The display flickered. The side route opened. Fresh air poured through. The crowd shifted toward it. At the West Bay, one of the freight carriers burst open. Not with fire, with a violent release of white vapor that spread low across the floor. Everett saw the Horizon response agents turn toward Ilara. They had been waiting for the panic. Now they moved through it. Ilara, he said. She saw them too. Go, she told him. No, the West Bay. You can stop the rest. And you? I can get people through the door. He hated the split. Every instinct he had told him to keep her within reach. But the second carrier was already releasing vapor. If all six opened, the pressure system would draw it through the building. He made the decision in one hard breath. Do not let them take you, he said. That was already the plan. Everett ran toward the West Bay. The vapor thickened around his legs. It was cold, not toxic by itself, but it hid the floor and made breathing hard. He tore open the carrier control unit. 3 glowing nodes fed the pressure relay, but the main feed also kept air moving to the treatment room nearby. If he cut that feed, the pressure trap would stop, but the patient's breathing unit would fail. Through the vapor, Everett heard someone pounding on a sealed utility door. He followed the sound. Behind the door were 4 people in a small auxiliary treatment room. One lay attached to a breathing unit. The door was locked because the building had shifted into containment mode. Everett looked from the main feed to the door. The right choice was not neat. It was not fast. He cut the false safety line, the sabotage line that falsely reported stable pressure. The building alarm screamed. Then he used the overloaded cable to keep air flowing to the treatment room while he forced open the utility lock. The shock tool spat sparks. The vapor curled around him. The lock gave way. Inside, a woman with dark hair and a stained utility jacket held the breathing unit steady beside the patient. You cut the false signal, she said. Everett looked at the blinking nodes. That is a more polite way to say it. The pressure controller is behind the carrier array. If you shut it down wrong, the backup will surge. Can you stop it? The woman looked past him at the vapor spreading through the hall. I can. I helped design the failsafe that was meant to prevent this. Name? Asteron. Everett Sloan. Congratulations, Dessa. You are now having a terrible day with us. Dessa unplugged a diagnostic tool from the wall and lifted the portable breathing unit for the patient. The people here first. He helped move the patient and the others into the eastern corridor, where Ilara had created a moving line of civilians toward the open side route. For a heartbeat, Everett saw her through the crowd. Ressa, the transit technician, burst from the maintenance kiosk beside the service gate, steering a cargo cart hard into the agent's path. Wrong direction, she called. The cart spilled water containers across the floor. The agent stumbled. Ilara vanished through a service gate. Everett felt something release in his chest. Then Dessa grabbed his sleeve. Panel, she said. They ran to the carrier array. Dessa opened a smaller maintenance hatch that Everett had missed and plugged in her diagnostic tool. Her fingers moved quickly, but she was not calm. You could see the fear in the tightness around her mouth. You knew which panel to open, Everett said. I designed a failsafe, Dessa replied. And someone used it against the people it was meant to protect. Yes. The third carrier began to vent. Dessa changed the feed pattern. The nodes blinked red, then amber, then went dark one at a time. The pressure in the market stabilized. A final alarm rang, low and disappointed. The vapor began to clear. Everett leaned against the carrier frame, breathing hard. You did good, he said. Dessa gave him a tired look. You cut an active civic pressure line with a hand tool. It worked. It almost did not. Still counts. Ilara reached them with her hood gone and her face visible to everyone in the West Bay. Behind her, civilians were helping one another through the emergency route. No one was cheering. There was no time. But several people looked at Ilara differently than they had an hour earlier. Not as a face on a warning screen. As the woman who had stayed when the air started to leave the room. Dessa looked at her and went pale. You are Ilara Venn. I am. You should not be here. I have heard that a lot today. Dessa glanced at Everett, then at Ressa. The third incident is not a rumor. It is already set. Ilara's expression changed. Civic Corps. Dessa knew that. I worked on the continuity architecture, Dessa said. Not by choice. They brought me in after they started delaying repairs on Riven. Water filters, storm sensors, food routes. They called it temporary load balancing, but they were withholding just enough support to make Riven look weak before the charter vote. Ilara went very still. Civic Corps validates stability protocol, Dessa said. Crown Line was the first emergency. This was the second, meant to create panic and make the story against Ilara feel real. If Civic Corps suffers the final failure, it will use all three incidents to lock the autonomy charter and keep Riven under continuity authority control. Can we stop it? Everett asked. Yes. Good. No. He looked at her. Dessa's eyes filled with something like shame. The access key that opened the first continuity channel came from inside your delegation. Ilara did not blink. Who? She asked. I do not know the final name. I saw only the authority seal. Dessa Svalovid. But it was high enough to bypass every barrier. A distant siren rose outside the supply exchange, and Ressa checked the radio she had taken from one of the fallen agents. Horizon response is sealing the district. Everett looked at the people still leaving the building. The second incident had failed to become a mass disaster, which meant the people behind it would push the final phase harder. We need Civic Corps before they turn the first two attacks into the excuse for a permanent lock, he said. Dessa nodded, but she looked toward the public corridor. There's a maintenance route. It goes below the central towers. I can get you close. Ressa raised her hand. Not all of us. Somebody needs to stay here. Everett shook his head. No. If Civic Corps locks the sectors, the people leaving here will need a way out, Ressa said. I know the transit grid. I can open the old emergency lifts from this side. You will be alone. Ressa looked at the damage around them. I've been alone since I filed that report. Ilara stepped close to her. You do not have to do this. Yes, Ressa said. Ido. I watched a report disappear. I watched people treat a broken rail like a paperwork problem. I am done standing near the edge of things and hoping someone else has a plan. Everett saw Ilara accept that, not gladly, but with respect. Ilara touched Ressa's forearm. Stay in contact. I will. As long as you do not destroy another official device. Everett looked offended. That was one device. Ressa gave him a thin smile. So far, they left the supply exchange through a maintenance route as the outer gates began to close, moving toward the central towers before the final Civic Corps failure could begin. Behind them, Ressa climbed toward the old transit controls that would keep the emergency lifts open when Civic Corps started locking sectors. Ahead, the city's central towers glowed with clean, distant light. Beneath them, Corps needed the control center to turn the first two attacks into a legal-looking seizure of Riven's future. Civic Corps waited beneath them like a heart built from locks. Dessa led Everett and Ilara through a maintenance route under the central towers. It had been built for service crews with maps, permissions, spare time, and no one trying to arrest them. Everett had none of those things. The route narrowed through a ladder shaft, crossed a broken service bridge, and ran above the thermal lines. Every few minutes, a deep shiver passed through the walls. At first, Everett thought it was simply the mass of the towers above them settling into evening traffic. Then Dessa checked the readout on her diagnostic tool and went quiet. What? He asked. The load is rising. From what? Civic Corps is drawing power into its containment systems, Dessa said. It is starting the final failure before the system should be ready. Ilara looked at her. It should not activate containment until the third incident begins. Dessa stared at the numbers. Then someone is moving it early. Corrin is moving early, Everett said. He needs Civic Corps to finish the pattern before anyone can prove what Crown Line and the supply exchange were. Or he knows the supply exchange did not give him what he needed, Ilara said. Same result. The bridge ahead of them had collapsed on one side. A narrow maintenance rail ran along the wall, barely wider than Everett's boot. On the far end, a wheel lock opened into the lower core access. Dessa looked at it and shook her head. That rail is not rated for 3 people. Then it is fortunate there are only 3 of us, Everett said. That is not how ratings work. Tell the rail. Ilara stepped toward the edge. I can go first. No, Everett said. She turned. You do not know the control sequence at the other side. I know a wheel lock. You know how to force a wheel lock. That is different. Usually faster. Everett. He looked at her. The arguments between them had changed since Crownline. Earlier, she had sounded like a client resisting a security instruction. Now she sounded like a partner insisting on being trusted with the part only she could do. He looked at the rail. Then at Dessa, who was carrying the diagnostic tool and the small packet of physical data recovered from the supply exchange. Ilara first, he said. Dessa second. I anchor the line. Ilara did not smile. She only nodded once. Everett drove a climbing spike into the wall, tied a short safety line through the rail supports, and clipped Ilara to it. She stepped onto the narrow edge. Wind from the thermal chamber pulled at her coat. Blue light pulsed below her feet. Halfway across, the rail shuddered. Everett tightened the line. Keep moving, he said. I am moving. You sound offended. I'm balancing over a machine that could cook us from the inside. Then your focus is excellent. She reached the other side, crouched by the wheel lock, and began turning it. Dessa followed. Everett stayed on the near edge, holding the line steady. The rail bucked again. This time, the support beneath Everett's left foot broke loose. He dropped hard against the wall. The line caught him, but his shoulders struck the rail bracket with a force that sent pain down his arm. For a moment, he hung above the light-filled chamber, boots scraping for purchase. Everett. Ilara's voice came sharp through the tunnel. I'm fine, he said automatically. That was not an answer. He found the rail with one boot, then the other. His left arm did not want to cooperate. Dessa crossed the last few feet and grabbed the line from the far side. Together, she and Ilara pulled it tight enough for Everett to climb back onto the rail. When he reached the access platform, Ilara caught him by the front of his jacket. You are hurt. I am upright. Those are not the same thing. I'm learning that today. She pushed him down onto a low-maintenance box before he could move toward the wheel lock. Dessa watched them for a moment, then turned away to study the entry panel. Ilara opened the emergency kit at Everett's belt with more competence than he expected. She found the medical wrap, peeled back the torn fabric at his shoulder, and inspected the bruise spreading beneath it. It is not dislocated, she said. That is good news. It is a bad bruise. I have met worse bruises. You say that as if it makes this one feel ignored. He looked at her. She was trying to sound stern. Her hands were steady, but the pale lines at her neck had brightened again. You are worried, he said. I am treating an injury. Those can overlap. Her eyes rose to his. For a second, the tunnel, the alarms, and the city above them all seemed farther away. Then she tightened the wrap around his shoulder. Everett hissed. That was deliberate, he said. That was necessary. Your definition of necessary is getting more dangerous. My definition is adapting. He had no answer to that. She fastened the wrap and pressed her palm lightly against the center of his chest, checking his breathing. The touch lasted only a moment, but neither of them moved right away. Dessa cleared her throat. The door is open, she said. Everett stood too quickly. Pain flashed down his arm. Ilara caught his elbow. Slowly, she said. Yes, ma'am. Her brows lifted. Do not start that. Was not going to. You were. Probably. The lower core access opened into an old regulation chamber, built before Asteron moved most civic power into hidden automated systems. The circular room was lined with dead display panels and manual control wheels, and one clear path led through the dust to the central console. Someone was waiting there. Arvon Tell stood with his hands folded behind his back. He was the senior advisor who had helped train Ilara for the Riven delegation, and he had once taught her to trust Asteron's careful procedures. His hair had gone silver at the temples, and his plain coat held no official insignia. He looked tired in a way Everett recognized. Not the tiredness of a man who had been running, but of someone who had spent too long calling a terrible decision responsible. Ilara stopped. For the first time since Crownline, Everett saw her lose the next step. Arvon, she said, Arvon's eyes went to her shoulder, then to Everett's wrapped arm, then to Dessa. "You should not have come this far," he said. Everett shifted slightly in front of Ilara. That had started to feel like a city motto. Arvon ignored him. "I left the maintenance route open," he said to Ilara. "The outer routes are already sealed. I thought perhaps I could speak with you before Corin reaches this level." "You knew?" Ilara asked. Arvon's silence answered first. Dessa stepped forward. "You opened the continuity channel. You gave Corin the route he used to push stability protocol through the system." Arvon looked at her with a sadness that did not make Everett trust him anymore. "I authorized access to a stabilization review. I believed it would allow a measured delay, not give Corin a way to manipulate supplies, stage emergencies, and seize the transition. You gave him the keys," Dessa said. "They used them to starve repairs on Riven. I did not authorize that. But you made it possible," Ilara said. Her voice had gone quiet again. Everett had learned to be wary of that quiet. It was the sound she made when anger had turned too deep for volume. Arvon looked at Ilara, as if he could still see the younger woman he had guided into public service, the delegate who had once believed in every careful step of Asteron procedure. "Riven is not ready," he said. "You know the numbers. You know the repair backlog. You know how close the water stations are to failure. If the charter passes without a stable transition, people will suffer. They're suffering now, not on the scale they could." Everett saw Ilara flinch, not because the argument was new, but because some part of it had once been hers. "Continuity Authority has resources," Arvon said. "Engineers, supply fleets, protection. I believe we could secure a measured delay, a few years to strengthen the systems before the transfer. I told myself that keeping control would protect Riven until it was ready." "A few years," Dessa said. "They were already delaying shipments. They were making the failures worse." Arvon's eyes closed for a moment. "I know," he said. "You know now," Ilara said. "I know what Corin has become," Arvon said. This was not meant to be his operation. "But I opened the review path he used, and I did not stop asking questions soon enough." Everett felt the truth settle into place. Arvon had opened a narrow legal path because he feared a hard transition, and Corin had used that path, along with Horizon Response, to turn fear into control. "That does not make you innocent," Everett said. Arvon's gaze moved to him, cold for the first time. "You are a contractor. You do not understand what it means to choose between bad outcomes for an entire world." Everett's hand tightened near his shock tool. "No," he said. "I understand exactly what it means when someone with power calls another person's cage a compromise." The chamber went silent. Ilara stepped around Everett. "Did you authorize the attack?" "At Crown Line?" she asked. "No." "The supply exchange?" "No." "Then why are you here?" "Because I can still stop the third incident from becoming a catastrophe," Arvon said. Civic Core is already moving the final overload through the systems that validate the protocol. Dessa's diagnostic tool chirped sharply. Her face drained of color. "Too late," she said. Every dead panel in the chamber flickered to life. On the central display, Civic Core appeared as a layered map. Red lines spread through the lower power channels. Containment doors closed one after another. Emergency traffic rerouted into restricted zones. Asteron had begun to lock itself from the inside. Arvon moved toward the console. "Corin has activated the overload." Everett grabbed his arm. Arvon did not resist. He only looked at Ilara. "I can get you to verification vault," Arvon said. Tovin Rel is still there. He is the independent archivist who can validate the original records. If the evidence is secured before Civic Core collapses, Corin cannot lock the charter. Ilara stared at him. "You expect me to trust you?" "No," Arvon said. "I expect you to use me while I am still useful." It was not a plea. That made it worse. The far door exploded inward. Corindax entered with 4 Horizon Response agents behind him. The Continuity Authority official who had been steering the Stability Protocol campaign had finally stepped out from behind his screens. He wore the same clean dark armor Everett had seen at the supply exchange, but without the civic insignia now. There was no reason to pretend beneath the city. "Thank you," Corin said. "I was beginning to worry our paths would not converge." Everett moved in front of Ilara again. His left shoulder burned. He could still use the shock tool with his right hand. He checked distances, angles, exits. Corin noticed. You are very consistent, Mr. Sloan. People say that when they mean stubborn. I mean predictable. Corin's eyes moved to Arvon. And you, unfortunately, are late. Arvon said nothing. Corin held out a slim data slate. Ilara Venn. Sign the security acknowledgement. State that you accept temporary continuity authority control over Rivens. Transition infrastructure. In exchange, the public emergencies end, your companions are granted safe detention, and you retain your office pending review. Dessa stared at Corin. Ilara's expression hardened. You will stop the overload? She asked. Corin smiled slightly. I will restore order. After you cause the failure. After I prevent a worse one. Arvon's face tightened. Corin looked at him. That was always the argument, was it not? Corin wanted her signature to turn the staged emergencies into official grounds to deny Riven control of its own systems. If Ilara signed, he would stop Civic Core, but keep the charter frozen under rules he had manipulated from start. Her gaze flicked to the red map, then to Dessa, to Arvon, to Everett. Everett did not tell her what to do. That mattered. He could see it in her eyes. You cannot save Riven by making it kneel, Ilara said. Corin's smile faded. No, he said, but you can save your friends. Ilara looked at the slate. Then she pushed it away. Corin raised one hand. The agents moved. Everett fired the shock tool into the nearest overhead conduit. The chamber went dark. For 2 seconds, only emergency lights remained. That was enough. Dessa threw her diagnostic case into the legs of the closest agent. Arvon hit the manual wheel beside the central console, releasing a blast of pressure from an old service line. Everett grabbed Ilara's hand and ran toward the side hatch he had marked when they entered. A restraint bolt cracked past his shoulder. They hit the hatch. It was locked. Of course it is, Everett said. Ilara shoved past him, pressed both palms to the old authority plate, and spoke a sequence in her own language so fast he could not follow the words. The lock stayed red. Corin's agents closed behind them. Arvon reached the panel from the other side of the chamber. His hand shook as he entered an override. The light turned amber. Go, he said. Ilara stared at him. Arvon, she began. Go, he said again louder. The hatch opened. Everett pushed Ilara and Dessa through. He turned back just long enough to see Arvon seize the manual wheel with both hands as Corin came toward him through the flashing red light. Then the hatch shut between them. All three ran into the sloping tunnel toward verification vault as pressure doors slammed shut behind them. The floor trembled under their feet. The vault is below us, Dessa said. And Tovin? Ilara asked. Still inside, if he has not been forced out. Dessa checked the diagnostic tool as they ran. The overload has entered the lower thermal exchange. If it reaches the main chamber, heat and power will fail through crown line, lower ring, and the lower public levels. Ilara looked at the red lines climbing across the display. Then we split at the next junction. At the next junction, the route split. A vertical shaft on the right led down to verification vault, where Ilara could validate the original records. A narrow service route on the left bent toward the thermal relief controls, where Everett and Dessa could keep Civic Core from turning the overload into a mass casualty event. If the relief controls stay closed, the vault may remain stable long enough to verify the records, Dessa said. But the lower levels take the full surge. And if we open them, Ilara asked, the core systems will be damaged. People get time to evacuate. Everett saw Ilara standing between the two routes. One path led toward the proof that could free Riven. The other led toward people they could not see and might never know. We split, she said. No, Everett said at once. She turned on him. The vault needs me. The relief controls need you and Dessa. Corin will be hunting the vault. And you are injured. I can still turn a wheel. I know. Her voice softened. That is why I trust you to do it. Ilara removed the physical memory wafer, relay printout, and Dessa's data strip from her coat. She sealed them in a pouch and clipped it inside Everett's jacket. Everett and Dessa needed the data to trace the true load path at the relief controls, and the pouch then had to reach the vault to complete the Civic Core record. Use these to find the true load path, she said. Then get them to the vault. And you need them to verify the archive. I memorized the access sequence. Tovin has the independent records. Her eyes held his. Cool me. Back. Everett wanted to answer with a joke. Instead he said, I will. She caught his jacket and touched her forehead to his. It was brief, deliberate, and more honest than any promise either of them could make in a collapsing city. Do not make me regret trusting you, she said. Not planning to. Then she climbed into the shaft. Everett watched until the door shut behind her. Dessa looked at him. You two have terrible timing. We are aware. They ran left. Dessa, the fail-safe engineer, led Everett into the thermal route, already hot enough to blur the air. Blue coolant lines ran along the walls. Two had cracked, spilling steam across the floor. Everett led Dessa through the gaps, using the data pouch to match the load pattern on her tool with the pipes around them. At the end of the thermal route, the manual relief chamber stood behind a thick alloy cover. The cover was locked by a horizon response interface, one more control point placed between the city and the people who needed it to work. Dessa opened the panel and went still. The control wheel is gone. In its place, 3 thin leads ran from a blinking remote box into the wall. Can you bypass it? Everett asked. I can identify the security lock lead by its marked insulation, Dessa said. But I cannot safely tell which of the other 2 controls thermal relief and which keeps the pressure feed stable. How long to open the box? Too long. Everett pulled his shock tool free. The charge indicator was low. The casing had already been damaged in the chamber with Corin. Dessa saw what he intended and shook her head. If you hit the wrong line, the relief vents all at once. If I do nothing, the lower levels become a furnace. He thought of the people trapped behind the false emergency routes. He thought of the transit car, of Ilara refusing to leave strangers behind while the city tried to make her look guilty for caring. Stand back, he said. Everett, turn the wheel when the lock drops. Slow. Save the people, not the machinery. He drove the shock tool into the marked security lock lead. The remote box flared white. Alarm screamed. The lock released. Dessa seized the exposed manual wheel and turned it with both hands. Coolant surged through the side channels. The pressure shifted. Everett's tool overheated against his palm, and he had to wrench it free as the interface box burst into sparks. The ruined device fell in 2 pieces at his feet. Dessa kept turning. The red lines on her display began to fall. It is working, she said. The heat surge began to fall, but the false evacuation routing still held civilians behind a pressure wall and a sealed upper gate. Then the radio at Dessa's belt crackled. Dessa, Everett, Ressa, the transit technician who had stayed behind to open the emergency lifts, spoke through the static. The emergency lifts are open from lower ring, so the trapped civilians have a way out. But Horizon Response is using the upper gate to seal the final corridor. Everett grabbed the radio. Where is Corin? Below you. He has 2 agents with him. The relief controls were open, but civilians still could not reach Ressa's emergency lifts until Everett and Dessa cleared the remaining false routes. Everett and Dessa ran back toward the shaft junction. On the way, they found several civilians trapped behind a transparent pressure wall, sealed in by the false evacuation routing. Dessa pointed to a manual latch beyond the wall. There is a crawl channel above. Everett looked at the narrow metal tube. His shoulder felt like broken glass. Of course there is. You cannot fit. I can fit badly. He climbed before she could argue. The channel buckled under him as he crawled toward the latch. Below, the trapped people pressed their hands to the clear barrier, watching him with the terrible stillness of people who had stopped believing anyone was coming. Everett reached the far end, pulled the latch, and dropped through the opening as the wall slid aside. The civilians rushed past Dessa toward Ressa's lift route. Everett hit the floor hard, stayed down for one breath, then forced himself up. Dessa stared at him. You're not allowed to say you are fine. I was not going to. Good. The upper gate stood before them, tall and sealed, with a narrow observation window. On the far side, Corin and two agents were moving down the final corridor toward verification vault, while Everett and Dessa were blocked on the other side. Corin saw Everett and smiled. A speaker panel lit up. "You chose the relief controls," Corin said. Everett leaned toward the window. "You chose bad timing. The city will stabilize. You have delayed the inevitable. People are getting out. People always get out of something. The question is who controls what remains." Dessa examined the gate. Another Horizon response interface blocked the manual wheel. Above it, a narrow cable channel ran toward the vault. Everett opened the pouch inside his jacket. The physical data had to reach Ilara. Without it, the archive could verify Crown Line and the supply exchange, but not the civic core overload that tied Corin to the entire plan. Dessa understood at once. The conduit is sealed. Everything is sealed in this city. He pried the cover loose with the broken casing of his shock tool. The sharp edge cut his hands. He pushed the pouch into the channel. It caught at the first bend. On the other side of the window, Corin's smile disappeared. His agents ran back toward the gate. "Second joint," Dessa said, studying the relay printout. Everett shoved his arm deeper into the conduit, ignoring the pain in his shoulder. The pouch scraped around the bend and vanished toward the vault. Corin reached the gate just as Everett pulled free. The Horizon interface began to unlock. Dessa grabbed the manual wheel. "I can hold it for a few seconds. You will be on this side." "I know." The gate opened a foot. One agent forced through with a restraint launcher raised. Everett met him with a broken tool casing, knocked the launcher aside, and drove the agent back against the frame. The second agent reached through. Everett kicked the emergency pedal beneath the wheel. Dessa turned hard. The gate shuttered closed, trapping no one but leaving Corin on the far side. Corin stepped to the observation window. "You are throwing away your life for a vote," he said. Everett was breathing hard now. "No, I'm throwing away a job for people who need air." The gate sealed. Far below, Ilara entered verification vault alone, carrying the access sequence in memory and waiting for the physical evidence Everett was trying to send through. Tovin Rell, the independent archive custodian, watched Ilara through the small viewing panel before opening the door. He looked exhausted, cautious, and deeply unhappy to find a wanted delegate standing at the archive entrance. "Every system above us says you're under security review," he said. "Every system above us is compromised. You have proof. I have the access sequence. The physical records are coming." Tovin let her in. The vault was small and old, built around a central archive engine and rows of physical record bays. It had no audience space, no public screens, and no place for speeches. It existed for one purpose: to determine whether a record was original or altered. Ilara began with Crown Line. She entered the route pattern from memory. Tovin added his independent archive key. The engine brought up the original transit commands, the false maintenance access, and a continuity routing that had bypassed ordinary review. Tovin checked the archive response. "Verified," he said. Ilara moved to the supply exchange record. The procurement orders linked to continuity authority, and the false pressure controls linked to the same hidden authorization chain that had redirected Crown Line. The chamber shook. Tovin looked toward the door. "Civic core is failing." "Then validate faster." He stared at her, then worked faster. The third record opened as a blank red line. Without Dessa's data, the archive could not prove who ordered the civic core overload or connected to the plan to freeze Riven's charter. Tovin turned to Ilara. "There is another option," Tovin said. "A limited review. It will halt your detention status and delay the autonomy suspension. It will protect your position, but it will leave the full chain sealed. It will not expose the full chain. No, it will protect the people who built it." Tovin did not argue. Ilara thought of Arvon, of the years he had called delay a safeguard, of Everett holding a falling transit car together long enough for strangers to leave it alive. "No limited review," she said. Another impact struck the vault door. The receiving tray beside the archive clicked open. The pouch slid into view. Ilara's breath caught. Tovin loaded Dessa's data strip. The true civic core control pattern appeared. linking the final overload to horizon response, and then to the same continuity authority route that had manipulated Crown Line and the supply exchange. Every path joined. Tovin entered the final validation key. The archive engine deepened in tone. On the display, stability protocol changed from active suspension to suspended pending fraud review. The system could no longer use the three-staged emergencies to freeze the autonomy charter. The red lines vanished. The archive did not celebrate. It did not announce victory. It simply began doing the work it had been designed to do before frightened people found ways to bend it. The validated evidence locked into the independent archive record. Emergency authorizations froze, and Corin could no longer use his old authority to revive the three incidents. They will try to challenge the review, Tovin said. Let them, Ilara replied. They may claim the records were introduced under duress. Then they can examine every source. That is why this place exists. Tovin looked at her. Most people come here asking for a record that protects them. I did too, Ilara said. At first, outside the vault, metal struck the door again. Corin was not yet finished. A command pattern flashed across the outer panel, attempting to restore his horizon response authority through an emergency security exception. Tovin moved to the console. He is trying to force a containment order. Can he? Not if the archive can see the original chain. The system compared Corin's command to the validated records. The panel light shifted from red to gray. A line appeared on the display, identifying the exception request as linked to an active fraud review. For the first time, Ilara allowed herself one slow breath. The vault door did not open because someone surrendered. It opened because the systems meant to protect the city had been given their true instructions again, and those instructions no longer protected Corin's claim. When Corin stood in the corridor beyond it, he understood that too. The calm mask he had worn all day was gone, not replaced by panic, but by the bare anger of a man who had believed systems were only tools for the people strong enough to seize them. You could have saved your career, he said to Ilara. You could have saved your delegation. I'm trying to save more than that. And when Riven fails without Asteron, Ilara looked past him toward the damaged core, where civic responders were already moving through the reopened routes. Then Riven will face its failures as its own, she said, not as an excuse for Asteron to own it. Corin had no answer that could survive the record behind her. For the first time that day, Asteron's systems stopped treating Ilara as the threat. The vault door unlocked. Corin stood outside it, but the city had changed around him. Ressa's emergency route had brought independent civic responders up the transit spine. The archive record was not a broadcast, and it did not need to be. It was a source system with seals no one could change without exposing the change. Corin's authority codes were invalid, and his agents lowered their launchers. He looked at Ilara with open contempt. You think this changes what Riven is? Ilara stepped into the doorway. No, she said. It changes who gets to decide. Corin was taken into custody in the same corridor where he had expected to control the final outcome. Arvon emerged later from the regulation chamber with civic responders. He had used the manual wheel long enough to keep the route open, then surrendered when there was no more reason to hide. He looked at Ilara. I thought I could keep the worst outcome away, he said. You chose it for people who did not get to vote, she replied. I know. There was no forgiveness in that corridor. No argument that could make his choice smaller. Ilara nodded once and turned away. Everett found her outside the vault after the alarms had faded to a low-maintenance hum. His hands were bandaged. His shoulder was wrapped. The broken halves of his registered shock tool sat in a clear evidence bag nearby. Ressa arrived through the lift route, dirty and limping, but upright. You look terrible, she told Everett. That is the nicest thing anyone has said to me tonight. Dessa joined them, exhausted but smiling for the first time. The lower levels are stable. Damaged but stable. Tovin stood at the vault entrance. The autonomy charter cannot proceed on its old schedule, Tovin said. An independent audit must finish first. But stability protocol is suspended, and continuity authority cannot use the stage crises to take back control. It was not a clean victory, but it changed who got to decide. Weeks later, Everett sat in a quiet room at Asteron's departure docks, reading the formal notice that listed the destroyed equipment, bypassed locks, and rules he had broken while preventing the city from falling apart. Ilara found him there with a travel case at her feet. The first oversight flight to Riven was leaving soon. She had traded the formal delegate coat for practical clothes, and she looked less like someone carrying a title than someone ready to do difficult work. Everett set the notice aside. "You're offering me a job. I'm offering you a choice." She opened a map of Riven's scattered settlements and repair lines. "You will not be my guard," she said. "I do not want anyone standing behind me and waiting for danger." "That is good," Everett said. "I'm terrible at standing still." A smile touched her face. "I want someone beside me," she said. "Someone who knows when a door is a trap. Someone who helps build routes that do not leave people behind." Everett looked at the map, then at the departure gate beyond the glass. The safe version of his old life was gone. In its place was an unfamiliar world, hard work, real risk, and a woman who had chosen truth even when it cost her the future she had planned. He picked up her case with his good hand. "Does Riven have fewer doors that need permission?" Ilara laughed, quiet and real. "Not yet," she said, "but we are working on it." He held out his hand. This time she took it. Together, they walked toward the shuttle and the first journey to Riven. If Everett and Ilara's story meant something to you, please like this video and share it with someone who loves sci-fi adventures. Subscribe to the channel for more human and alien sci-fi. Stories of courage, trust, and new beginnings. Thank you for listening. See you in the next story.